A couple of weeks ago, Nick Stevens sat in here and we worried, wondered, all of that, the level of concern for our friends out in the western part of the state over not just what was going to happen with high school sports, but that's the thrust of the program, but just life in general. So Nick Stevens, managing editor, highschoolot.com, is in studio with us. Let's just start with clarity over the schedule and when the playoffs are going to start, how the calendar has been altered to handle a lot of the makeups, not just in football, but across the board.
Yeah, most fall sports have now been impacted in terms of the calendar. Not all of them, but most of them. We will start getting to the postseason in some fall sports this week.
Wow.
It ends this week for some sports.
It's the middle of August, of October. Feels like August. No, it doesn't.
It takes a while to get through all these rounds of playoffs. But in terms of football, there's been an extra week added to the regular season. So now that last Friday night will be the 8th of November. And then that Sunday they will see the playoffs. So that also allows teams to play on Saturday if they need to. And the reason they did that is because you have to have 72 hours between football games. You cannot play more often than that due to obvious safety and health concerns.
Gosh.
So that allows teams to possibly play on Tuesday and on Saturday if needed. And there will be some teams in the West who are going to have to play twice a week as we move forward. What that does to the playoffs is it just pushes everything back a week. So the state championships will now be the December 20th and 21st. But they're not reducing the playoff size or anything like that. The other sports like volleyball, soccer, they've also been changed. Those playoffs have been condensed.
Sure. I mean, you can do it with those sports.
Right. Yeah. There's not as many concerns, although I'll tell you, there are some boys soccer coaches not really looking forward to playing 3 games in 1 week in the playoffs.
It can be physical.
Right. So that is going to happen, though, just out of necessity. And we've seen that happen in years past when other hurricanes have hit the coast. Volleyball also, same thing, going to be condensed. We've seen a few changes in terms of like when regular season has to end in some other sports like tennis.
Right.
But the big changes are definitely to football in terms of extending that season. And that's just because of the nature of the sport and how often you can play a game.
All right, in terms of who gets to host, for teams out in the western, the most affected part of the state, what are the odds, chances that they can, for those teams that deserve, that they can safely, financially host these events, or do they have to, get on buses and travel?
So it's going to depend on the school and the situation. I can tell you, like we talked when I was on last time, we talked about Pisgah in particular in Canton. Pisgah actually played a football game this past Friday night. They lost. It was a thriller at the end, but they had to host it at the middle school in town. Now, they end the season with their arch rival, Tuscola. And they're supposed to host that game. They believe that there is a chance that they could host that game at their home stadium, Memorial Stadium, despite all the flooding that happened. The turf of the field is actually intact. So the turf was...
It's an artificial turf surface?
It's an artificial turf surface, so the turf was not ruined, which is what happened last time.
That is shocking.
Flooded. The turf was just ripped off of the face of the earth. They are going to have engineers check the bleachers and all that kind of stuff to make sure they are safe. But there is at least some hope that they're going to be able to host a game before the season ends.
So they didn't have to do any maintenance to it? They probably had to do some level of
there's lots of
maintenance.
like mud and dirt and stuff all over the place.
All the crushed tires got to be had to be dislodged.
Yeah, I don't know how all that played out. But yeah, that they have said, the school has said publicly, actually they posted on social media, they believe they have a chance to host that big rivalry game on November 8th there at Memorial Stadium.
That is absolutely incredible. Okay, so we're not shortening. What do we have, like 256 teams will make the playoffs?
64 times 4, whatever that is.
Yeah.
Okay.
There we go.
64 I do words,
4.
not numbers.
Right. And we're not shortening the playoffs in any of the other sports. We're staying As is?
We're not going to lose rounds in any of the playoffs. They are going to be condensed, but in terms of the number of rounds, no, that's not going to change.
Yeah, football, playing 2 football games in a week is aggressive.
It is. It is.
It's aggressive. Well, at least the kids can get paid now.
They can. NIL is legal as of yesterday afternoon.
All right, just as an update on that, Nick Stevens, high school OT, is joining us here on the Adam Gold Show. Just giving us an update on what this NIL deal is. The judge approved the deal, which I think initially we didn't think would happen anytime soon, but they got to it very quickly.
Yeah, so when the lawsuit that was filed in Wake County Court, we knew there would be a hearing of some sort in September. Did not know if they would make any sort of judgment at that hearing. They granted the preliminary injunction, and basically the argument that was made has nothing to do with, like, should kids be paid or not. The argument that was made was the state legislature passed a law that told the State Board of Education that they needed to create rules that allow kids to use their name, image, and likeness. Well, they didn't. They created a rule that prevented kids.
Right.
So it came down to that, and the judge was like, the legislature gave you a directive and you didn't follow it, so we're granting this preliminary injunction. And the judge signed and issued the order yesterday.
Right.
So it is, NIL in high school sports in North Carolina is now a thing, and I can tell you that high school sports did not die yesterday. The sun came up this morning, and we're going to play games.
All right, so here's I'm curious, if the state legislature, and this is me editorializing, not you, which I get the sense doesn't love public education. Just as a general rule, the state legislature doesn't seem to be pro-public education. But if they tell the Board of Education, or the entity that you're referring to, if they tell them to create a system where athletes can realize their name, image, and likeness in the marketplace, and they do the opposite, where's the disconnect?
Well, so if you listen to the State Board of Education meetings, which I don't recommend you do, I did it so no one else has to. They're very long and
not all heroes wear capes.
They're very long meetings. But if you listen to their discussion about NIL when they were talking about this permanent rule that they were discussing, putting it in front of a public hearing this fall and voting on it next year, that if passed would allow NIL in July of next year. When they were discussing that, they were saying, look, we just wanted to hold the status quo until we had time to learn about it and figure out the way forward, which, I mean, I guess if you're not in it every day in the world of sports, you might need to learn more about it, but it's really not that complicated of an issue, and it's happening across the country. We are late to the party. And I mean, there was even a state senator from Alamance County, Amy Galey, and she is the chair of the Education Committee, wrote a letter to the State Board of Education last month and said, hey, you did not follow what we told you to do.
Okay.
And she even said this lawsuit was totally predictable because of it. So, I don't know where the disconnect was there, or if it was just the State Board of Education saying, hey, we need to learn more before we move forward on this. I think they were given like 3 or 4 months to figure out what to do, and they didn't feel like that was enough time. So I think that's I think that's where things stand.
Then maybe my editorial comment was incorrect, and I stand corrected if it was a mistake. Nick Stevens at Nick Stevens HSOT. I don't know. It looked.
We're up there on the TV.
Shot. Thank you very much. Appreciate your time, man.
Yeah, and I'll be listening to you tonight on the radio when I'm leaving Lenovo Center.
Right.
Sitting in traffic for an hour.
Oh, you're going to the game tonight?
I'll be there, yeah.
All right, good.